Hello and welcome to the Writer's Review. I'm Brian Dusky.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And today we are reviewing a classic film, some may say, Boogie Nights. It's been out for a minute. I have seen the film. Dalton has now seen the film just recently, so
My first experience.
This is going to be an interesting experience. So stay tuned and let's have some fun. So, Dalton, I have seen this film at least 3 or 4 times. It's kind of a go-to when I honestly, when I meet somebody and they want to get into my film side. I wouldn't say it's my number one go-to, but it's it's a safe pick for me because a lot of people I tend to enjoy it, and it has the music and stuff like that. So, but it's also very interesting, as a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson movies are.
Okay.
And this was Paul Thomas Anderson's coming out party.
Okay.
He did one feature film before this. It was a small little independent film. This was his big one. And I have seen the film multiple times. I actually read the full-length script, which had some scenes that actually aren't in the movie in it. So I'm just going to hand this over to you, and then I'm going to retort and go off some of your points. So,
Sure.
What did you think?
Let me frame this a little bit. I have never seen Boogie Nights.
Yeah.
I have always dismissed Boogie Nights as anytime I saw it on the shelf in the video store, it's a movie about disco. I don't care. I'm not watching that. So I was wrong.
Yeah.
I'm also disappointed in the fact that when you meet strangers, your immediate go-to is you should watch Boogie Nights. You must lead a very lonely life because this is woof. Not what I wanted it to be.
It's had a good success rate, I'll tell you that.
It has. So this might be a little bit of unpopular opinions. I think we have here a film, though, with some very good standout performances. This is a hell of a cast.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great cast, and there's some great performances from the cast.
Indeed.
I think it's ambitious in concept. I don't know if it was executed flawlessly.
Okay.
So, not sure where I want to dive in with this.
Okay, so let's talk about first and foremost the direction of the film.
Okay.
Let's talk about that because Paul Thomas Anderson has a style,
It is.
and something I want to bring up is the opening of the film. So the opening of the film is actually one of my favorite parts. The screen's black, and it actually holds on black for a hot minute.
Yes.
And you're just like, are we gonna go? And then the music hits, and it kind of has a little Dutch angle, and then comes out, and then you're put into kind of that long tracking shot going into the club. Very similar to Goodfellas, which came out a few years before. What did you think of the opening? What were you thinking as you saw that opening?
It was a good opening, and I think the music adds a good nostalgic ambiance to the film. You have to have that
Sure.
music to make this film because you are trying to capture a little piece of a generation.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to capture, honestly, an art form that was dying, which I think is very successful in Boogie Nights. I'm going to get into that with Burt Reynolds here a little bit later.
Yeah.
But the opening scene is fine. It sets the tone of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit different. You get a little bit of a directorial style.
Mm-hmm.
You get immersed into the film immediately from black. That's fine. Draw me in. But then we just start. We just go with it with no explanation whatsoever. And as someone who has never seen this film, nor did I have any prior knowledge of what this film was really about,
Yeah.
little abrupt. Took me a second to ease in. I'm like, oh, okay, so this ain't about the club. This is about something else.
So you're saying they went into the porn industry really fast.
Yeah, wholeheartedly.
There was no set up to kind of set you up for what the story's about. You're just right in.
3 minutes after we pan into this club, this lovely scene you're talking about, Burt Reynolds is in the kitchen talking to Marky Mark, saying, hey, I'm gonna make you a star. It's a little abrupt, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I can deal with abrupt because it kind of jolts you aware that this is not your typical movie. This is not going to be your standard film.
Sure.
But I think there are a lot of things that are standardized about this.
Okay.
This is a classic Hollywood tale. This is the young man going to make a name for himself. This is the man falling from grace and then trying to pick up the pieces. It's a classic Hollywood tale.
Yeah.
We also get little pieces from Burt Reynolds as well that are absolutely gorgeous. This is a man who has honed his craft and is on top of the world, but he wants to make it better in an industry that's dying.
Yeah.
So there are some good things going on with this, but altogether, it feels like it should be flawless. You've got great performances. You've got John C. Reilly and Philip Seymour Hoffman, absolutely wonderful in the film.
Oh, yeah.
You've got Mark Wahlberg. You've got Burt Reynolds, Julianne Moore, Heather Graham. Plenty of good options.
Yeah.
Everything's executing correctly. but it's not meshing together right.
Okay, so like what didn't make it mesh together?
There's just some kind of disconnect. So once I had established, I'm like, oh, so this is about the porn industry. That's fun, that's refreshing. I thought I'm along for the ride. 30 minutes into the movie, I'm like, okay, now I miss the porn industry. Can we bring that back? Because at this point, it's starting to get a little stagnant. It's not progressing the way I wanted it to progress.
Okay.
There's no build-up for Mark Wahlberg's character. He is immediately just rocketed on top, and everything is going flawlessly.
Yeah.
And it feels like I'm literally watching an hour of Mark Wahlberg partying, and I don't care.
I will say that, and I hear you on that. That's an interesting point. I never did. I will admit, I never thought about that. How he just all of the sudden is big. There's no like struggles for a bit and then he's big. But I think that plays to it at the same time because one, with how the porn industry worked back then, I think there were probably only a select amount of producers, so it wasn't like you did a couple of small stuff. I think he was just all of a sudden, hey, we're putting you in there, kid. And I think that's kind of reminiscent to like 1950s Hollywood.
Okay.
To where like 1950s Hollywood, there probably wasn't, and I don't know this for sure, so don't quote me on this, but I'm imagining people would sign a studio deal and they would just throw you in. Like there was no, we'll put you in for small parts, and then we'll do. I think if they really thought you had stuff, they would just put you right in.
And Mark Wahlberg clearly has the stuff. Natural talent and charisma is clearly how he got here.
And I think that's another. I think that's another side of it is that shows that's his character flaw is that he is given so much success so quickly that he never really learned to appreciate it. I think.
Okay.
So I get your frustration on that. I don't agree with it because I think maybe the film could have been cut down a little bit because there is a lot of stuff, but there's also so many characters to focus on.
Okay.
Because this isn't really I mean, you can make the argument that it's about Dirk Diggler, but it's really about the entire group because what he finds in this is family. What he finds in this is acceptance. And you see that at the end of the film because even though they've all had their messed up situations, their lives have been wrecked, and obviously the porn industry isn't what it used to be, so they're not living as big and as large as they probably could have before, they're still a knit group. They're still in that house together.
And I do think it is successful that you do become invested in these characters, even how small the character parts are. Philip Seymour Hoffman is a very small part in this.
Yeah.
But you become very invested in that character.
Oh yeah.
William H. Macy. Oh God. Very small part in this movie. Very invested in that character.
That the scene where he finally has it.
Yes.
And like shoots his wife and then shoots himself is great.
Okay.
Like I love it because I love the countdown to like the new decade, and then he shoots himself right at the end of the countdown. I think that's a really well paced scene.
It is.
And I love the dynamic that they keep going back to that of him walking in on his wife, like having sex with somebody.
And there's good build up with that. That's a great comedic moment. It is. One of my favorite scenes is actually where he's arriving at one of the parties at Jack's house, and he sees his wife sleeping with a man in the parking lot with a crowd. And she says to him, "Bill, you're embarrassing me. Please leave." And he walks away, and this guy's trying to have a conversation about, I think it's the film. The film that they're going to be using. It's not going to be minimalistic. It's going to be great. And this whole time we get this split shot right behind him of his wife having sex with a stranger. It's gorgeous. It's hilarious. And it makes it all the more poignant when he offs himself at the party. But you also get a lot of metaphorical things going on with that. That's the death of the industry right there. As the new year turns, the industry takes its turn downward. And we see Jack spiral downward, which I would argue is the best character point in this movie. Burt Reynolds as Jack Horner when he's starting to lose it a little bit. This is the man who was on top of the world, was on top of his craft, and wanted to make it something special. He wanted to make it more than just pornography. He wanted to make a film. And when that opportunity was taken from him, you actually see him kind of break his own laws and start to develop something new. They kind of do like a reality-based pornography. When they're driving around in a limousine, they pick up a man. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. And you see that struggle, and you see that death of the artist. That is the best character moment in this movie. But regardless, every other small character I'm invested in. Yeah. And that's interesting. I like to see them develop. I like to see them change from the late 70s to the early 80s. But it still doesn't bring it all together for me.
See.
There's too many small things happening and too many small, great performances happening. There's no great overall.
That's fair. I can see that. I think that an argument can be made that that is a narrative style on its own.
It is.
And that it's maybe just, if that's not what you're looking for, it's not going to appeal to you. I had a conversation with somebody about this with the movie Goodfellas.
Okay.
He didn't. Have you seen Goodfellas?
I have not.
Okay, so he didn't care for Goodfellas because Goodfellas doesn't have a central like character role, and that could be seen as a flaw. However, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but there's biopics that are like that, to where like you're following a person's life, you're going through their life. So I think there's a narrative style in that just fits. Let's talk about specific scenes. First and foremost, I want to talk about. Let's start off with the more optimistic. When you, and maybe it was that scene. Is there a scene that you walk away with, like when you think of this movie, you think of that scene?
I'm not sure if there was one specifically for me.
Okay.
I think there were a lot of good little scenes. I think there were a lot of scenes that had a lot of comedic relief that weren't necessary for the film.
Sure.
Although maybe a little bit overshadowed by what's actually going on.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have a great specific scene besides the one with Little Bill. That one really stuck out in my mind because it was funny and it was well filmed, well performed. What do you got? What's your best scene in this?
So, I'm kind of stuck on it, but ultimately, because there's scenes that are very prevalent to the story, and those are important scenes, but then there's just, to me, memorable scenes and scenes that are the most like pleasing to watch, and that's the entire drug deal scene.
Okay.
Where they walk in and they're there to buy the drugs, the fake drugs. They're going to give them the fake drugs, and they're going to basically try and take the money with Thomas Jane. And it's a wonderful scene. I've never seen, and I want to do a video on this someday. I've never seen a movie in one scene where the music matches the scene so well.
Okay.
Because that song, because they play the Night Ranger song at the beginning, the Sister Christian song. And he actually like sings along with it at one point, and it kind of just goes along. And then when they play Jesse's Girl later on, which was funny because actually in the original script, it wasn't meant to be Jesse's Girl. I want to say it was an REO Speedwagon song, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Night Ranger was intended. That was, but the part that he sings was a completely different part of the song. He was singing like the opening verse as opposed to like the chorus, which is weird because the chorus is a lot more memorable. But no, that to me was a nervousness, a general uneasiness of that scene, and the music played to it as well, and just like having like the little like Asian kid in the background just like blowing up firecrackers is that kind of just like weird thing that's happening in the background, making you even more uneasy, and then it kind of comes to a climax. And outside of maybe the scene where he's touching himself in front of the guy in the car before he gets beat up,
Yes.
that is probably like the ultimate like rock bottom for him, because you know he was a porn industry guy, and now he's like all of a sudden
Masturbating for strangers.
Well, not only that, but with the scene I'm talking about, he's like also he goes from porn industry to like crime, and so it's a different it's almost it's a very different feel for him. So I feel like that was probably. Did you have anything you want to say about that?
There's a lot of good scenes, but there's just no great scene. There's one that's really memorable to me, but I'm not going to say it's a great scene by any means. It's Don Cheadle buying donuts.
Yes, that's another great one. Yeah,
it's good. It's well done. It's memorable, but it's not incredible. I'm not walking out of the theater remembering that moment specifically. But when I'm talking about things I remember from the film, little points, that's definitely one of them.
Okay.
And again, I think that's the problem with this is you want to go back. Let's talk about music a little bit. We're talking about the Sister Christian song. I think the soundtrack's wonderful for this, and the soundtrack is necessary for this, but it falls into the tropes of a nostalgia film.
Okay.
This feels like Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
I'm not gonna go that far.
It does.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
No.
this is Fast Times at Ridgemont High with a little bit of Pulp Fiction grime.
Because I think if you get rid of the music, is the movie less special? Yes.
Absolutely.
But I think if you get rid of the music, there's still a good movie. There's still interest because the characters are good enough. So it's just like also American Graffiti, to where I think that's an example to where you take the music out of American Graffiti, it is not a good movie in my opinion. because the story in that is so cookie cutter and so like not special, and there's no urgency. Where I think, yes, there's no one clear story we're following in Boogie Nights. There's series of moments that that do have a sense of urgency to them, and I think from the beginning we're kind of set into this. We're following this guy throughout his life, and so I think it's acceptable. I hear what you're saying about they're not fully coming together. That's why it's not a perfect film for me.
Okay.
But I think everything else helps it balance out.
Okay. And like, I've been, harping on this a little bit. I don't think it's a bad film by any means.
Right.
But not as great as some people want it to be.
Okay.
Above average, yes. Not great. Not even good.
Okay,
I wouldn't complain about seeing this in theaters. I'd be okay with spending my money on this. But I'm probably not going to watch it again.
See, I feel like you're being a little harsh on it because I think what you're describing is, yes, not great, but you're still just, I think from everything you're saying, if I were to hear you talk about this, I would think it's a good movie.
Okay. And I think there are a lot of good points to draw again, and again, it comes down to the performances.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I'm working on something, I think, say, you need to watch Burt Reynolds in Boogie Nights, you need to capture that feel. That's a good compliment towards Burt Reynolds' performance.
Okay.
There are a lot of good things going on, but none of them come together.
Okay, so on the opposite side of the scene thing, was there a scene in the movie that lost you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The ending scene. There's no reason for it whatsoever.
Okay.
None whatsoever. It's like what's that? It's Jaws. You don't need to see the shark to know the shark's there.
I see what you mean. Okay. I thought you were talking about how they were all at the party together. They were all at the house together.
Oh no.
You're talking about taking it out.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg's big show at the end. Again, this is a Jaws moment for me. I've established this man has a large penis. That has been the joke of the movie.
Yeah.
There's no reason for me to see it at the end before you cut to credits.
I can't argue with you on that. I don't think it doesn't take me out of it because I think it was one of those things that was so shocking for me.
It was.
It was like, oh, it still had my vested interest. Now, if I'm going to have an honest discussion, like if I was on the production of this movie and like say I was the screenwriter and someone tells me we don't need that, I would have been like, all right, fair.
Yeah, it seems unnecessary, but that again becomes the memorable.
Because if you do that in the first 20 minutes, I might accept that. Because if you do it in the first 20 minutes, like, be like, okay, well, now we know what this guy's working with. Now we know, why he's so special. But it's like we've kind of already established that at that point. So I feel like, and this Paul Thomas Anderson has this issue to where he kind of does do stuff that's not necessary and it's very self-indulgent.
Okay.
And I felt like that was a very self-indulgent moment. And I was just like, yeah, I just don't think that it's necessary because like, while it's not a great movie, another example of a movie similar to this that came out within 3 or 4 years was Wonderland, which was about John Holmes, who was a famous porn star, who they actually mentioned in this movie, played by Val Kilmer. And never is there a spot in the movie where he takes his junk out, and so because it's not necessary because they mentioned several times in that movie how he is a gifted individual.
Yeah.
But never do they have to show it. You just accept it by people's reactions.
Yes.
Like
it's established.
Yeah. Like the scene that kills me every time that I always forget is in the movie because I've seen this and I've never watched the movie like close to another time. It's usually I'll watch it and then maybe a year later I'll watch it again. 6 months later I'll watch it again. The scene that always takes me back is when the character of the Colonel, who's basically like the head producer, who ends up being arrested for child pornography. Like Jesus, that scene is always distracting to me when he's just like, "There's the kids, they're so cute," and just like I'm like, "Oh dear God."
I'll give you that. However, the scene later towards the movie, it's just a brief clip, of him basically just getting smacked in a jail cell.
That was weird. Yeah,
I kind of dug it.
Oh yeah, gosh, that was a very interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. Like I don't hate it, but it was one of those things I was like, oh, because like again, I feel like after the child pornography thing, we could have just let him go.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it was an effective scene. But the scene I'm talking about is when he's just like, not gonna say the exact line. He's like, I heard you have a nice member you're working with.
Yeah, I see it.
And then he just like looks down, looks back up. Very nice.
Yes.
And just like it was
scene.
so creepy because he just like looks at it and then looks back up. And then when you find out everything later about him, like it totally makes that creepiness make sense.
Okay. That's fair. That's very fair. Again, I don't think it was necessary at the ending for the reveal. I think it was established. I think a lot of our characters, the overall character arc for everyone is a fall from grace. It's a hero's journey almost, building something up and then falling and trying to recover. And if we're looking at Mark Wahlberg as the typical hero in a hero's journey, we have that. We have the young man coming into his own. He is defying his normal life to set out and do something better.
Yeah.
He has his mentor. Eventually, he and the mentor break ties. He has his fall from grace. And in the end, he realizes he can still do this. But I don't need the scene in the end. I don't need to physically see him be like, you know what? I'm Dirk Diggler. It's fine.
Yeah, no, so, all right. So there's an interesting conversation point. This movie, I love, but one thing that's very interesting that I've looked at over the years is I don't want to say steals or copies, but it pulls from a lot of other famous movies.
Okay.
So one movie that it kind of takes a lot from, I think, is Goodfellas, and it has a very similar style with the music. And I mentioned before the opening tracking shot, they kind of pull a lot from that. The small kind of individual characters you see throughout, and like the big thing with it is his break off from Jack. So there's a scene in Goodfellas that's very similar to that, to where Ray Liotta's character gets busted for drugs.
Okay.
And he comes back to him and he says, I don't want to ever talk to you again. He goes, I'm going to give you this money and I'm going to turn my back. And it's very much breaking ties.
Okay.
And so I kind of saw that in there. And then the big one with me is Raging Bull, another Scorsese movie. Which, have you seen Raging Bull?
I have not.
Okay, so at the end of Raging Bull, actually it's bookended. It starts in the beginning and it happens in the end too. He's sitting in a dressing room and he's talking into a mirror. And he's performing a monologue, which is pretty much what Mark Wahlberg is doing at the end there. He's performing a monologue from one of his movies. Now, in Raging Bull, Robert De Niro is performing a monologue from the classic film on the Waterfront. Marlon Brando's I Could Have Been a Contender speech.
Okay.
And he does it, and he does it, and he does it, and then the guy comes in and he says, you ready to go? And he goes, yeah. And then he kind of gives himself a little hype up and then walks off. And I was like, that's very similar to what they do there. Because he kind of does his little speech, and then him taking out his member is sort of him hyping himself up, reminding himself that he is worthy.
Okay.
Because before De Niro walks out, he kind of does little punches, and because he used to be this big boxer, and now he's this overweight man. And so this is kind of similar to that, and so I'm just like, that's kind of one thing that does draw me back. I'm like, you're not the most original here. I feel like I feel like you're taking a lot from other movies, but not in a overly clever way. I don't think it's stealing straight up. It's not like Dane Cook stealing off Louis C.K. But I also don't think it's Tarantino, taking inspiration from a lot of films that he grew up on. So I think it's a little too obvious, but not like criminally. Okay, let's just talk about overall thoughts. I'm gonna give the movie 9 out of 10. I think that I love it. I think it's very entertaining. I think it's very memorable. I don't, from a script standpoint, it has a lot of issues, but I think that it's covered in other areas that it does excel at. So that's what I'm gonna give it.
Okay. I was a little torn, and I was trying to don't be hating on this movie for no reason. I gave it 7 out of 10. It is above average film. I give it a standard average 7. I don't know where I was going with that. Let's roll with it.
7's a good score. I mean, that's not disrespectful.
I wanted to give it a 6 though. I did because it's just a little bit above average. There's nothing incredibly special, but when I think you take into account the performances from a lot of the cast, especially the cast who are not at this point huge names, John C. Reilly, Philip Seymour Hoffman, stepping up very small parts, I think it deserves a 7. Not a bad film, not a great film.
All right, that's fair. So yeah, we both generally agree that it is a it's a quality work. It's just, I think it's great. I think it's a classic. You don't fall into that. You think it's a little bit overrated.
Yeah.
And that's fair.
I'll give it a watch, though.
You know,
I'd suggest
not
watching it.
everybody can be as right as me. It's totally fine.
Okay with that.
Okay, so that's our review of Boogie Nights. If you guys want to check out this film on your own, I recommend it. He kind of says, pass.
Yeah, do what you want. I don't care.
So yeah, if you guys like videos like this and you want to see more, just click on our channel below and subscribe.